Hi, my name is Jerome and I am working with the Académie Royale de Belgique on developing a sustainable theory of the firm, on which I'd like to present today a few of my initial starting points going from my dissertation, which I wrote at the University of Cologne, on the cooperative economy, to which I return. So to begin, we're facing a dual challenge, which is both ecological and social in nature, and both concern sustainability. On the left here is a picture currently of the heat wave happening in India and Pakistan. Very extreme temperatures there, combined with a largely impoverished population, so very much manifesting those dual crises. And as I argue, these must be dealt with simultaneously. You can't deal with one without dealing with the other. And so my proposal is a relational view, embracing the new discipline of relational economics, moving from the perspective of viewing individuals as the center of analysis to viewing networks, and embracing the approach developed by Robert Ulanovitz called process ecology, which emphasizes qualitative rather than quantitative change, and is also able to translate between the two. And generally embracing a pluralistic approach to epistemology, looking at things like typologies, and within different typologies, the taxonomies. So to go into further detail, first of all, I look at democracy as an important concept and question whether the definitions we have today are suitable. So many of them are very ambiguous and even sometimes contradictory in terms. You can look at Helen Landemore's recent book, Open Democracy, for very in-depth discussion on these various, so oftentimes contradictory notions. So also looking at the importance between the connection between economics or the economy rather, and democracy. And for instance, Herbert Ginz's critique of Darren Acemoglu's notion of democracy as a result of considerations of the elite with respect to the masses as being very important there. Basically, in my dissertation, The Cooperative Economy, I suggest that democracy relates primarily to organizing the domains of necessity versus freedom. Who has membership to which of these domains is very much vital to what substantively is democracy. Also, I look at individuals like Cornelius Castoriadis, who looks at reflection, judgment, politics, philosophy, and the what he calls civic imaginary is very much related, interrelated categories. Also very important is the redefinition of the social contract, embracing the critique recently of brought by David Graeber and Wengrove, the late David Graeber and David Wengrove, of the indigenous critique, Native American tribes, for instance, critiquing the Western European model of representation or the social contract. And in fact, Immanuel Kant discusses somewhat notions such as permissive law as tools for transitioning from a nominally authoritarian or autocratic regime to one that is more republican in nature. So that is a useful tool as well. And in fact, we see that as Josef Wieland says, firms today are the dominant actors in the world in terms of the economy. 70% of trade occurs in intra-firm transfers and not in the market. So we have to look at how firms are organized internally, and in particular, looking at notions like cooperation is a very vital tool or endeavor in this regard. So in fact, going from why do people cooperate to how they cooperate is an important part of this analysis. So we see that, for instance, pre-adaptations and dealing with uncertainty, as the graphic here at the top right displays, is an important answer to why people actually cooperate, as biologists like Edwin and Wilson say. But we need to look at how, very much more in focus, looking at things like relational rents, the co-determination of both utility, rationalization, rationality, and as well norm rationality, and notions like collective entrepreneurship and creating shared value, both by Philippe de Voet and Josef Wieland. And in fact, I suggest that in the paper that a neo-abolitionist agenda is the best tool to realizing these things, and thus the importance of law in realizing cooperation is significant. And the social function of private law, as Autor von Gierke says in an essay with the same title, is vital in this regard. And in fact, Gierke's main conclusion is that there's no right without duties, which is a very central phrase in German law. In fact, applying this to the labor contract and labor relations, we see that labor is in fact inalienable. It belongs to the person who is providing it. And thus, David Ellerman provides a very useful guide in terms of applying the theory of imputation from legal jurisprudence to the economic category of the labor contract. And so what does a sustainable theory of the firm look like? I suggest that, again, an epistemic and methodological framework of pluralism is important. Things like metaphysical patience, provided by people like Robert Ulanowitz and Karl Popper, where we don't assume that just maximizing one category, just for instance, like GDP, at the expense of other things like happiness or reducing inequality, are very dangerous. And so metaphysical patience, again, embraces the notion that we don't know to a great degree what the consequences of our actions are in the long term on other parameters. So balancing is important. Relationships, again, are the important objects of analysis. Social innovations, say, moving beyond mere Schumpeterian technical innovations as the guiding view of what is driving social change and development. And in particular, I argue in the dissertation that innovations with respect to democratic choice mechanisms and democratic collective choice are vital in further analysis. So my conclusions are that in accordance with what Mariana Mazzucato in her latest book, Mission Economy, suggests, the wicked problems of the present require mission orientation. And I emphasize a relational, cooperative, and neo-abolitionist approach to providing alternative parameters for missions, in fact. So an example would be data governance, where I, in the paper, analyze a potential for a hostile, what I call a hostile cooperative takeover, using existing examples like Poly and Fairbnb. And another example, of course, would be the currently ongoing constitutional plebiscite in Chile to rewrite the Pinochet-era constitution. So closing questions would be things like, how does one translate these existing missions, for instance, things like the Sustainable Development Goals, into firm-level cost accounting, and what is the role of cooperatives actually in realizing a mission-oriented, what I call a mission-oriented cooperative economy? Thank you.